Hi, my name's Kirsten Madsen, and I had the opportunity of doing my capstone project for Emmanuel Church in Greenwood, Indiana. And this project was over education for clergy staff on the topics of sensory integration and behavioral regulation. Emmanuel Church began in the 1970s with one small location in a living room of a family's house. Since then, it has expanded to 7 physical locations with 9 microsites, primarily located within Johnson County and Marion County here in Indiana. However, they have also expanded down to Florida as well. Their mission looks to see people come to Christ and grow in Christ, with their core value recognizing that no matter what background an individual come from, they are still a part of God's family. For the purpose of this DCE project, I was working with the Family Ministries team as they in the last 5 years have created a support room to foster inclusivity of all of God's children, that they may require both sensory and behavioral regulation supports. And within my project, it was my opportunity to help them create more resources and gain more knowledge in order for those children to be able to have the most inclusive and accessible opportunity to church programming. So, to start this project off, I had to look at the literature and what does the literature say? So, to begin with, I looked at the OTPF, or Occupational Therapy Practice Framework, in which determined that spirituality is a deep experience of meaning brought by engaging in occupations. And as we know, for children, their primary occupation is play. So, children living with disabilities and chronic illnesses constantly face challenges throughout their daily lives, and church is the one place where they can feel safe in being uniquely themselves. And with the OTPF, they discuss that their unique self comes from the values, belief, and spirituality influencing their motivation to engage in their occupation while giving them the meaning to their lives. We can look at the DSM 5, in which they discuss that sensory processing disorder is a part of all diagnoses, even normal individuals that don't have a diagnosis. But not all diagnoses fall under sensory processing disorder. And that's important to remember because as they're experiencing these difficulties, it's impacting the way that they experience their lives. And through experiencing sensory processing disorders or behavioral regulation dysfunctions, it can decrease their quality of life, which also can decrease their feelings of inclusion and participation within their community activities. And that ultimately is what we don't want to happen. However, there has been a lot of barriers discussed to this participation due to the belief that only individuals that have specific pieces of training or knowledge should work with these individuals. And that's where the gaps in the literature come to. And how do we fix that? How do we increase that knowledge and decrease this barrier? And that's what I also found in my needs assessment. So, with sensory processing disorder, it is important that we understand that for all individuals to feel regulated, all 7 of our senses have to be in equality of each other. And so, those 7 senses that we look at are visual, auditory, smell, taste, touch, and our vestibular system. So, with our vestibular system, that is our equilibrium and our balance and how we see things. But then we also look at our proprioception too, and that's understanding how our body feels in space. So, concerning children's spiritual ministry, when a child is hungry during service, their recognition of that feeling inside their bodies is what's sensed by our interoceptors. And they might initiate a cry for help because they're hungry, which then is going to affect their behavior. So, sensory dysregulation can affect their behaviors as well, and that's physically, emotionally, cognitively, and socially too. So, when our sensory and behavioral aspects of an individual are regulated and are working at their proper levels, then individuals can perform their occupations at their best possible level. And a reminder for this occupation, for this particular set of people, that occupation is play. So, for my needs assessment, it was primarily looking at the needs of their support rooms, which they are designed to provide additional physical, sensory, and emotional supports while the children are participating within their congregational setting, but it provides them a safe and inclusive environment for them to be in. However, in discussion with several of the staff members, including the Director of Family Ministries and Kids Ministries and the Impact Team coordinators, it was addressed that their volunteers and even staff members have a limited perspective on the concepts of sensory integration and behavioral regulation, in which they were coming to find out that they don't understand how to provide interventions or tools or skills that are necessary in order to help regulate the children when they are in their dysregulated fronts. And that was, a big concern of theirs. And they're also concerned that when they are having these kiddos within the support rooms, that they don't have a safe environment, nor do they have tools such as tunnels or enough sensory equipment to address all the needs of the kids, but also they're finding that their support rooms are becoming overrun with kiddos that really should just be within their classrooms. So it was kind of also coming to mind that this is a great opportunity for advocacy of OT's role within being a consultative partner within a community setting. The theory that guided my capstone experience was the person, environment, and occupation theory, or PEO. So, this gives a holistic view of the individual and all the components that play a role in shaping the person of who they are. And those three components are the person, the occupation, and the environment, and they all overlap each other in the center, in which you go further into the theory, they say that spirituality is at the center of the person. So let's look at the person. It's made up of their sensory capabilities and general health. It also gives equal importance to aspects such as cultural, socioeconomic, institutional, physical, and social contexts. These are fluid as each person might behave differently depending on the setting that they are interacting in. The occupation of the individual can be described as a series of tasks and activities that are self directed and functional in which the individual engages in within their lifetime. And the occupation for a child specifically is that of education, play, and as well as a congregational member. So the three components of PEO go together with the development of spirituality in children with special needs. Authors Krause and Wolf, from my literature review, discuss that people who feel they have a sense of belonging in a congregation are more accepting or satisfied, regardless of what disability they might have. And spirituality directly impacts the physical and subjective well being of an individual, which, as the person is impacted, the other three components are also impacted. The frame of reference that I have chosen to help guide my capstone experience was Sensory Integration Frame of Reference. And according to the American Occupational Therapy Association, or AOTA, SI involves perceiving, modulating, organizing, and interpreting sensations in order to maximize occupational performance and participation. So, when individuals are properly integrated within the human body in accordance with their senses, positive outcomes come with their social emotional regulation, physical and motor communication, and cognitive skills. And those can be maintained and developed over time. However, when our senses are dysregulated and all over the place and not in equal balance, it affects our everyday functioning with our activities of daily living, our occupations, our instruments of daily living, such as driving or eating and feeding. And so, being able to maintain all of our senses at an equal level is important, especially for a child as they're growing and developing and learning how to associate within the world. And they can provide purposeful interactions with their environment as well. So, as mentioned, I created an educational training program for the staff members at Emmanuel Church. This was specifically geared towards those at the Stones Crossing location. However, since they have several churches throughout the Greenwood, Johnson County, and Marion County areas, I was able to expand my participants list to include all the campuses that are within the 30-minute radius. So, with that, I created a 1 hour professional education session after the analysis of the needs assessment, which revealed a gap in knowledge amongst the family ministries team regarding topics of sensory integration and behavioral regulation for children. And within these training sessions, they were all geared towards understanding those topics a little bit better through group discussions and participation, as well as through activities during those sessions. And I held 2 sessions for the context of scheduling, um, and they're able to be administered in person or they could join in each week via Google Meets. So, the participants that I had in my educational trainings were all full time or part time ministry staff at Emmanuel Church. Primarily, there were participants from the kids' ministry and family ministries, but there were also participants from student ministries and as well as curriculum development. In terms of the ratio of participants, we did have 16 female staff members and 4 male staff members. The male staff members were 2 were from the students team and 2 were from the curriculum and higher administration team. So it was good to have a mix of those male participants within the female ratio to kind of get a sense of overall understanding between both genders and to have the good mix between both kids ministries, students, and family ministries to have the different areas of growth that children do walk through. The overall goals for these participants were to increase knowledge of sensory integration, increase their comfortability working with the individuals experiencing difficulties, and to learn new intervention techniques that they can provide during a child's deregulation period or even just in general throughout their classrooms. During the 1 hour educational training sessions, they went through a variety of different topics. And we started off basic with vocabulary. And as you can see, the list here of vocabularies that were talked about throughout the session. So we had sensory integration and its broad topic of what it was. And then we broke it down into the vocab words of fight, flight, and fright. And then your hyper versus hypo. We also talked about definitions for behavioral regulation, self regulation, and executive functioning. We also went into main topics of zones of regulation, so understanding when a child is in the red zone versus the yellow zone, and how do we get back to the green zone from there. We have sensory processing disorder interventions based on the various different senses that a children might have difficulties with in terms of are they hypo or regulated and dysregulated. And with that, I was able to also provide resources for classroom support bags of sensory integration tools that might be helpful, like Play Doh and fidgets and different bean bags and stuff like that, were also provided to them. Based on the pre assessment that I got from the results, they also talked about having transition strategies And so that came with providing resources on how to build a visual schedule and also the use of visual timers. We also talked about meltdowns versus tantrums because they're finding that a lot of times their volunteers don't recognize a tantrum versus a meltdown or understanding the difference and just automatically calling the parent to come pick up their child. Then we also talked about the use of using breaks versus the support room. So I provided resources on both of those and when a child is experiencing different things, when a break should happen versus if they need to use the support room. One resource that I also provided them for all the topics was the use of animal walks. So playing Simon Says with the child and saying, when Simon says, stomp like a giraffe, to provide some input that a child might need. And I was able to get the staff members that were there up and interactive and kind of get their minds in a kinetic format so they can understand what the child might be feeling in those moments. So for my outcome measure, I chose to do a pre and post survey with questions based on a Likert scale, with 1 being fairly knowledgeable or comfortable to 5 being no knowledge or not comfortable at all. So I had a total of 20 participants complete the pre and post survey, in which most of the participants, like I said in the previous slides, worked within the family and kids ministries, with a few participants in the student ministries or the operations team slash overall support team. So as we can see from this, there was an increase in knowledge and comfortability surrounding interactions with individuals with sensory integration and behavioral regulation difficulties. So we can see with the current understanding of topics, we went from around a 3 down to about a 1.5. So that's about a 1.5 change to the plus side. So they increase their understanding as well. So, from the pre survey, going through the educational programming to taking the post survey. We also saw an increase in the comfortability around the children who are dysregulated and that they feel equipped to handle a child that is dysregulated. We also saw a really big increase in their feeling of comfortability implementing those interventions or having enough resources in their toolbox to provide those to the children. So, with that, we went from about a 3.15 to a 1.27 on that Likert scale on average of all 20 participants, giving us a change of about a 1.8. So seeing the results from the pre to post survey and seeing how well my participants understood after the sessions came from also asking questions during the sessions and getting peer to peer interactions within those sessions. And also, from the open-ended questions, I was able to develop more outside trainings. I was able to send individual people to be able to increase their knowledge even more after that post survey was sent out. Like I said on the last slide, I did get my participants the opportunity to give me some feedback and testimonials, and these are a couple that I got. One participant said, I would like to talk to various situations and how to apply what I have learned from the training. Another staff member said, staff response to and support of families. How can we best come alongside them? What resources can we share that will support them in gaining knowledge of these strategies as well? So, I actually met with both of these participants afterwards and kind of gave them more resources and kind of talked through some of the situations that they were experiencing, and through that, they were able to provide those resources. And I followed up within the next couple weeks, and they said that it was actually beneficial and that their students were able to comprehend more and to participate better. And then a third participant said, having this information will be very helpful in supporting our families' more inclusivity. Thank you for presenting this information. So just having that feedback, knowing that they understood and welcomed the information and that it was actually going to be helpful in the long run. At the end of my time with Emmanuel, I had the opportunity to sit down with the director of the family ministries team and kind of just go over the whole project, how it went. And one of the things that we talked about was the sustainability of this project. And we talked about that they have monthly impact team meetings with their whole impact team and volunteers, staff members, and that they will, one of the sessions, provide the resources I gave them as staff members and do a whole training on them so that their coordinators and impact team members can understand the same amount that their staff members do. And that will help the kiddos within the children's ministry as well as student ministry to feel more inclusive and have increased participation within their Sunday services. Also, the family director and I talked about how OTs have a role in providing consultative services and providing more education on these topics as they arrive. And we discussed creating a partnership between myself and Emmanuel Church and that kind of role as I do graduate and get certified in keeping that relationship. And I think that can apply to all kind of community settings and that have difficulties within the sensory integration and behavioral regulations, and that we can provide those consultative services on what resources should you have, what tools should you buy this resource versus this one, and just being that stepping stone. And as we have more knowledge, but also providing that knowledge that they can use within their classrooms too, so that we're not having the barrier that is found throughout the research. We also found that through my educational programming that staff members, as I discussed in my project outcomes, improved both in their comfortability in providing resources to these children and being around them, as well as their overall knowledge around these topics.